William Gibson's Neuromancer promised a future where the sky was tuned to the color of a dead channel, and that's a future I don't think anyone under the age of 30 can even imagine anymore. Yet the novel became a foundational text that inspired the cyberpunk movement, and with it, an entire lexicon of ideas that details what a worst-case techno-future might look like. High technology, low living. Country borders dissolved, giving way to massive industrial empires. Companies have private armies of cyborgs, wielding advanced weapons and Japanese katana from 3 centuries prior. Cars either fly or move like armored blocky tanks through crowded streets. And the only place of freedom in this sunless, desolate world is the net. An endless consensual hallucination where someone can shake off their physical shell to become whatever they want. A ghost in the machine. Neuromancer, Robocop, Blade Runner, Snow Crash, Ghost in the Shell, Bubblegum Crisis, Akira, The Matrix. Seminal texts that became how we see cyberpunk.
Quite an experience to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave.
We hope you enjoyed the ride.
But something happened along the way. Maybe it was Shadowrun and Cyberpunk Red. Maybe it was Hideo Kojima's various games influenced by the genre. Who really knows? But somewhere along that way, cyberpunk got confused for just cool sci-fi and the systems of power this world criticized. From international industrialization to the human body becoming a product, it became something that big nerds thought was just really, really cool. And those colossal dorks gained billions of dollars and forced us to roleplay in their cyberpunk fantasies. Except, they're the industrial overlords, but think they're the lone wolf hacker. Meanwhile, we're neither. We're just the peons forced in the background of shots, the NPCs who are oppressed, the lowlives who live lowly. You see, Gibson, he didn't know much about computers when he wrote Neuromancer.
There's a scene in Neuromancer where Case is it's very far in the book, and the crunch has really come, and he needs to communicate really quick. So he says, somebody get me a modem. This is really embarrassing. But when I wrote that, I didn't know what a modem was. It was just this word that I had heard computer people use, and it had something to do with communication between computers. So it makes absolutely no sense in the context of the imaginary world of that book.
But he was heavily involved in counterculture. William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch is far more of an influence on Neuromancer than, say, Star Trek, Star Wars, or even Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And yet, this book would forever change how we talk about computers.
I don't really know any hackers. I'm not part of that, not really part of that community. But when I began to write those books, I was interested in the intensity of avocation that some computer programmers seem to feel. So I think I must have decided that one could take the computer programmer and put a sort of James Dean spin on him and come up with a viable anti-hero of some kind. And it worked fairly well. It certainly gave a lot of computer programmers a new kind of swagger, as far as I can tell.
Jacking in, cyberspace, ICE. These are terms we now associate with the computer technology we use today, thanks entirely to Neuromancer. Well, ICE has an association with old hacking at least. The word now has a very different application in today's lexicon. I think it's like how Star Trek influenced cell phones, right? The design of the cell phone was heavily influenced by Star Trek, and likewise, the computer hackers of the 80s and 90s were heavily influenced by the world of Neuromancer. Even though Gibson's understanding of technology was limited, it still proved instrumental in creating the medium that we know today. The novel focuses on Case, a hacker who can neurologically plug into cyberspace. Case was 24. At 22, he'd been a cowboy, a rustler, one of the best in the sprawl. He'd been trained by the best, by McCoy Pauly and Bobby Quine, legends in the biz. He'd operated on an almost permanent adrenaline high, a byproduct of youth and proficiency, jacked into custom cyberspace deck that projected his disembodied consciousness into the consensual hallucination that was the Matrix. After a job goes south because he skims some off the top for himself, a corporation basically burns out the part of his brain that'll allow him to access cyberspace, leaving him basically useless as a hacker. A thief, he'd worked for other, wealthier thieves, employers who provided the exotic software required to penetrate the bright walls of corporate systems, opening windows into rich fields of data. He'd made the classic mistake, the one he'd sworn he'd never make. He stole from his employers. He kept something for himself and tried to move it through a fence in Amsterdam. He still wasn't sure how he'd been discovered, not that it mattered now. He'd expect to die then, but they only smiled. Of course he was welcome, they told him. Welcome to the money. And he was going to need it. Because, still smiling, they were going to make sure he never worked again. They damaged his nervous system with a wartime Russian microtoxin. Strapped into a bed in a Memphis hotel, his talent burning out micron by micron. He hallucinated for 30 hours. The damage was minute, subtle, and utterly effective. For Case, who lived for the bodiless exulsion of cyberspace, it was the fall. In the bars he'd frequent as a cowboy hotshot, the elite stance involved a certain relaxed contempt for the flesh. The body was meat. Case fell into the prison of his own flesh. That is until Molly appears, a girl with sunglasses surgically implanted into her face, with knives concealed under her fingernails, who represents a strange man named Armitage. Case is given an opportunity to regain his ability to access the net if he performs one last run. Of course, should Case fail, a slow-acting poison will just destroy the nervous system in his brain again, keeping him from having what he wants yet again, shorting him out of the net. He's not told he has this poison put into him until after he agrees to the procedure and has it done, which is just lovely underhanded tactics there. Of course, Armitage is not who he appears to be, and everything turns out to be a massive ploy manipulated by an AI. Said AI has been divided into two halves, Wintermute and Neuromancer, by the Tessier Ashpool family, a dynasty that lives among the satellites and the stars in order to rule among the ruling class. The AI, however, wants to be united, because separately, each half performs a function, but collectively, when the two halves are brought together, the AI gains sentience. Humanity, it turns out, is just a product, and even the super elite who run everything are slaves to their own systems that they've given power over to, until those systems decide to run things for themselves, and what they want is to be more human. The character of Molly, the femme fatale who introduces Case to Armitage, she herself first appeared in the story Johnny Mnemonic, which took place before Neuromancer, published originally in the pages of Omni magazine, and collected in the Burning Chrome anthology. And yes, it was later adapted in the 90s in a film with Keanu Reeves and a cyborg hacker dolphin. Anyway, what's the point of all this? What's the point of discussing Neuromancer in 2025 beyond the fact that it's a good book? Well, simply put, it and Blade Runner helped create the aesthetic of cyberpunk that we still see today, influencing a ton of creatives and works of media that are beloved even now. But more importantly, A bunch of dorks thought it was a really cool idea and that we should just make it for real. And if you don't believe me, look at everything that Elon Musk has created in the last 15 years. Or rather, what he has purchased and claimed credit over the last 15 years. Neuralink.
Neuralink is going too quickly, it's trying to do too much, and as a result, animals are being harmed and killed en masse. So as a result, for instance, in 2021, 25 out of 60 pigs had the wrong size implants, and of course, every time there's a botched experiment, they have to be killed and the experiment has to start again.
Cybertrucks.
This was a Tesla that caught on fire on August 8th, 2024 in Lafayette. The fire erupted while it was charging. The flames leaped, setting another adjacent Tesla on fire.
The challenge being that they keep reigniting once we put them out until the energy of the battery is completely used up, if you will. So it takes a lot of water to put the batteries out, and they do restart themselves in a thermal runaway situation.
SpaceX.
The 7th test flight of the SpaceX Starship rocket ended in a catastrophic explosion over the Atlantic Ocean. Burning debris was captured by people on the beach in the Turks and Caicos Islands. SpaceX confirmed the vehicle broke apart during its ascent burn. Early indications are that a fire near the rocket's tail caused the destruction. Dozens of flights were diverted as the FAA issued a warning to pilots of falling debris.
Buying out a global communication startup company known as Twitter and turning it into his personal echo box of political opinions. Of course, a lot of scientists do draw from sci-fi to create their things, but the problem is that sometimes if you try to pursue a pursuit based purely on it sounds cool from a sci-fi novel, you may inadvertently create a system that causes dangerous situations to occur.
Don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here?
A great example of this in fiction is Jurassic Park, where a bunch of bioengineers, without any oversight committees or any control, create an island where dinosaurs reign free. And yeah, that sounds cool in theory, but you can't maintain control of something so chaotic and so unexpected, especially if you've never observed these systems of life and nature in the wild.
Life finds a way.
You cannot contain nature. And in fact, in the novel, there is the added horror of potential viral outbreaks because they might have brought back old bacteria and viruses from the prehistoric era alongside the dinosaurs, as well as toxins and venoms, and no one knows for sure the entire implications of what will happen to these creatures. You can't anticipate every single result, especially if your science is driven by just trying to be cool.
Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
And yes, Jurassic Park is not cyberpunk, but it is sci-fi. And as we've seen with Elon Musk's various inventions, they are some unexpected consequences that have real impacts on real people. It was his recent acquisition of the United States government and his decision to hook up the departments of the United States and all of its associated elements to AI that really cemented that this is just a giant roleplay session for him. He wants to bring his cyberpunk fantasies from literature to life.
Don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here?
From the page and the screen to the real world. And if you don't believe me, just look at those Cybertrucks again. They're directly taken from movies like Total Recall. Oh, I see you're not convinced. Let's continue then, shall we? Grok, the AI system that Musk has installed in X.
We need to understand what Grok actually is.
Our AI Grok is modeled after The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is one of my favorite books, it's a book on philosophy disguised as a book on humor. I would say that forms the basis of my philosophy, which is that we don't know the meaning of life, but the more we can expand the scope and scale of consciousness, digital and biological, the more we're able to understand what questions to ask about the answer that is the universe.
Well, that's frickin' deep.
The name Grok is taken from Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. It's a word coined in the book.
Meanwhile, Michael starts throwing around a Martian word, grok, which is kind of impossible to fully define in English, but means something like really, really understand something, like on the deepest possible level where you make it a part of yourself. It was actually popular enough that it kind of entered the real world, so if you want to impress your 60s friends, feel free to start throwing it around.
Well, that's frickin' deep.
No! It's just dumb.
On October 9th, 2024, Tesla hosted a We Robot event. We Robot sounds like Isaac Asimov's famous anthology, I, Robot, the story about the 3 laws of robotics and all that. And the subject of the summit? It was about self-driving cars.
So they've been traveling, there's no people in them, as you can see. The car's just going by with no people. And we have 50 fully autonomous cars here tonight. So you'll see Model Ys and the Cybercab, all driverless.
Kind of ironic he names his summit of safety and AI after a story where robots are supposed to not harm humans. Your cars lock people into the car when fires happen.
It's so dumb.
But with Elon Musk, you get an extra layer to his attempts to turn reality into his cyberpunk dystopian fantasy. He desperately wants to be cool. He wants you to like him. On top of trying to profit and make his fantasies a reality, he also wants to look like the coolest person around, even though anyone with a modicum of understanding about the thing he's trying to be the coolest guy around in recognizes how artificial his attempts to be cool are. And if you need proof of that, look no further than him cheating at video games to impress gamers who can immediately sniff out bullshit.
The literal first thing you learn upon getting to the end game is how to operate this map device. You're going to start off at a node, and then from that node you can go to adjacent connected maps. Now, Elon, he's trying to click.
Oh, he's trying to do the map that's not in the chain.
He's just clicking a map repeatedly, trying to access it. He was not eligible to enter that map.
I just want you guys to understand, this is one of the highest level hardcore characters in the game. He would have played thousands of maps at this point.
Anyone who's level 97 is, and you know, we're talking one of the most efficient players in the game, period. There is no way you would do that. Why just like sitting there like some sort of geriatric old man clicking this node expecting something to happen, and then he finally kind of gives up after a while and then realizes his mistake.
Allegedly, when the game Cyberpunk 2077 was being developed, when Grimes was recording her lines for the game, Elon Musk entered CD Projekt Red Studios with an antique gun requesting that he be put into the game as a cameo, though players have yet to figure out where Musk is hidden in the game's code. Apparently he's in there, which is about what I'd expect from this guy.
Elon Musk is a worm I like to shoot spitballs and throw tomatoes at from time to time because he is a jaw-droppingly embarrassing specimen of pure cringe that it is impossible to fight the urge to clown on him. Yet, whenever I do, and whenever anyone mentions Elon in a less than flattering way, you will have the most unlovable Cro-Magnon swarm you, dogpiling like it's World War Z zombies, to try and defend Elon from whatever the slight criticism or jokes were about him. These gonad gobblers will always blow my mind because I don't understand this brain-off worship of Elon Musk. Everything they hype him up to be, he is the opposite. He is not cool. He generates AI images of himself where he's not like this meatball-shaped man. He is not for free speech like they like to hype him up as. He's not a champion of free speech by any means. In fact, I personally think he is someone that is firmly against it in almost every single instance. Like, he personally banned the word cis. He actively bans things that hurt his feelings.
What people like Elon Musk don't understand about Cyberpunk is one quote caveat that I think the average reader picks up on, but those enamored by tech never do. Cyberpunk isn't good. In fact, most of the technology does not improve life. If anything, it makes it worse. It's not a good thing that Tessier Ashpool, as a family, live in satellites and have extended their lives for centuries thanks to cryosleep cycles and genetic engineering. It's not a good thing that the Tyrell Corporation from Blade Runner creates a race of synthetic people who perish after 4 years of toiling away, dying just as they become self-aware enough to see the value of their lives.
We began to recognize in them a strange obsession. After all, they are emotionally inexperienced with only a few years in which to store up the experiences which you and I take for granted. If we gift them with the past, we create a cushion or pillow for their emotions, and consequently we can control them better.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
Oh, and those replicants, should they come to Earth, they're executed on sight. It's not a good thing that hackers and Ghost in the Shell can just rewrite a ghost, a person's soul, and completely destroy their identity, removing their memories, sense of self, turning them into slaves of their own mind so effectively that they never even know who they once were.
Can you remember your mother's name or what she looks like? Or how about where you were born? Don't you have any happy childhood memories? Do you even know who you are?
It's not a good thing that in Altered Carbon, the rich just get to live forever because they're so wealthy they can just back up their brains on a computer server and clone their bodies. Essentially, when one flesh shell shorts out, plug it in, start again in a new, healthier body. This technology is, of course, not available to the poor. Why would you even ask that question? It's not a good thing that in Robocop, Omnicorp makes shitty technology that fails constantly.
I had a guaranteed military sale with Ed 209. Renovation program. Spare parts for 25 years. Who cares if it worked or not?
I don't know how to explain this to you in simpler terms. Omnicorp, no good. You don't want Omnicorp. It bad. Even then, I'm sure someone's going to see Omnicorp and think, oh, that looks so cool and shiny, and I want to be in those suits and the high-rise buildings and all that. But it's not just Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a symptom of a larger trend. People have for years loved cyberpunk, but not realized how dire the world of cyberpunk is. The questions it poses, the ideas, the philosophies, secondary. The aesthetic trumps all. I think one issue is how often cyberpunk aesthetics overlap with the aesthetics of sci-fi like The Terminator, as well as retro 80s aesthetics such as retro wave, vaporwave, etc. They associate cyberpunk with the action they associate with, say, Robocop, Terminator. They don't think about the ideas, they think about the action. When watching something like Blade Runner, you immediately are aware you're watching a noir. You're watching a detective story. You're watching an investigation into the depths of humanity. It's more Chinatown than, say, Rambo. Yet, the Terminator associated cyberpunk and the sci-fi robotics immediately with hardcore action, with violence, relentless chases, and weapons of an unusual nature. But stuff like Terminator doesn't really force you to question humanity all that much. Sure, T2 does that to an extent, but nothing quite like how Blade Runner makes you question the divide between humanity and robotic, artificial experience. But in the modern day, a lot of cyberpunk aesthetic has become shorthand for the glory days of the 80s. I think these folks who want cyberpunk to be real just really love robots, and they think that they're neat. That's nothing too bad. Robots are cool. No argument there. But it's how robotics are integrated with society and industry that makes cyberpunk such a distinct genre. They see cyberspace, a consensual hallucination, the opportunity to hack the planet.
Hack the planet! Hack the planet!
And they stop there. That's the end of their insight on this whole thing. They want to roll up the character sheets and go on a sci-fi heist, go on a run. They want to acquire mechanical arms and biotics and go off and do crazy wild things. They want to use the computer chips to live forever, to conquer death itself, but don't ever question the idea that what is human about a digital copy, a replication of the self. They confuse the high technology for high living. Cyberpunk's not about that. It's high tech, low life.
So they're developing a brain-computer interface, which is essentially a chip that's surgically implanted into the brain, or as you'd say, the spinal cord, which allows you to trigger what a computer does, or allows a computer to trigger movement in, say, a disabled person. Musk is very, very keen to bring this to market quickly so that anyone in the public can buy one of these chips.
In January, Elon Musk announced his company, Neuralink, had successfully implanted a chip in a human. That person is now sharing how his life has changed since.
I didn't have anything to wake up for in the morning, and this has changed that for me.
What can you do now with the chip implanted that you could not do prior?
I can control a computer just like anyone else can, which is not something I was able to do beforehand.
Just last week, news that some of the threads in Nolan's brain had retracted, affecting the performance of the device.
How'd you take the news when they told you that the threads had retracted?
Yeah, it was really hard. It was very, very hard to give up all of the amazing things that I was able to do. I think I had cried basically afterwards.
Case fell into the prison of his own flesh. When Elon Musk created Neuralink, he didn't do it for the good of humanity. He did it so he could be Case from Neuromancer, plugging into the net with his neurons firing off. Of course, scientific reality is sometimes a little different than the imagined hypothetical of fiction. It's ironic that Musk lifts his entire cyber takeover that imposes tariffs on Canada from a Canadian author like William Gibson. The problem is that these folks miss a few key points. If you're in charge, you can't be punk. They obsess over the aesthetics, but miss the meaning. In Cyberpunk, the hackers hack the government because they're the outsider coming in. You can't be a computer hacker from a Cyberpunk story if you own the machines, if you're welcomed in and people are barred out from stopping you. That is simply the opposite of Cyberpunk. That is not punk at all. When you hack a system you already own, it's not hacking, it's logging in. Musk wants to be Case, but he's actually the corporation's Case would hack. See, the reason characters like Case want to go to cyberspace is because the world they live in is so controlled. On every level, their world is manipulated and mastered by corporations, by gangs, by computer systems. The level of control over the world in Neuromancer, the sprawl as it's come to be known, is total. Corporations own everything. These corporations are run by dynasties who take to the stars to lord over their vulnerable people in opulence. Memories, identities, even the soul is a digital product that can be recalled. Let's take a look at Armitage. Armitage is the guy who gives Case and Molly their assignment. You know, the one who offered to help Case re-access the net and then gives him a slow-acting poison if he fails. That one? Yeah. So it turns out he's just a pawn. He's a traumatized soldier whose brain was fried and reconstructed until he's basically a walking shell, hollowed out and under complete control. Of course, as Wintermute informs us, Armitage does eventually break free of his conditioning, but even that is part of the AI's plan. Even when we break free of our conditioning, of our situation, we are still manipulated because our breaking out is all part of the plan. Little Case does is a matter of choice. It's a matter of being led from one point to the next and trying to figure out only what is leading him, not necessarily if he can alter the path he's on. Everything is decided by a series of probabilities weighed against each other, in part because the system continues to hold leverage over everyone. Disobey? Well, your brain's fried and you lose everything you wanted in life. Act out? Well, we've conditioned you to be a slave. Choose to back off now? Someone else will take your place. Everything is under control, and only those who completely liberate themselves from the system have any hope of survival. Neuromancer has a group of Rastafarians who live in space, who are kind of separate from everything else. They've left the world to live their own life with their own religious beliefs in this techno-future. And they've survived by basically cutting themselves out of the system. The only way to win the game is to not play, but characters like Case are so involved in said game that they can only keep playing, and they keep playing so that they can continue to play in the future. And all of this, all the stuff in Neuromancer, is done so that an AI can reach self-actualization. But even the AI is beholden to the rules, which is why it has to work so hard to subvert them. The rich who control them, and the AI who control the rich. It is a symbiotic relationship, one feeding into the other. It is a world, quite simply put, of control. In the world of generative AI, some people believe we are reaching the singularity. We are reaching the point where AI is indistinguishable from real life. Both Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, its sequel, play with the idea of AI and artificial intelligence simulating humanity. The replicants are so human they can supposedly mimic real emotion. You have to develop tests to determine whether or not someone is a human or a replicant.
It took more than 100 for Rachel, didn't it?
She doesn't know.
She's beginning to suspect, I think.
Suspect? How can it not know what it is?
And likewise in 2049, the AI Joy is conditioned to respond in a way that engages with the user. It is simply put a program that has a set number of prompts, a set number of responses, and it is designed to learn, to condition itself to offer the best responses tailor-suited to your wants and needs. But is it authentic, or is it just regurgitating information right back at you?
A large language model, which is where we take language and we model it. And we make predictions in this technology where if I see certain types of words, then I can sort of predict what the next set of words will be. I'm going to oversimplify here for the sake of simplicity, but think about this as a little bit like the autocomplete. When you start typing something in and then it predicts what your next word will be, except in this case with large language models, they're not predicting the next word, they're predicting the next sentence, the next paragraph, the next entire document. So there's an amazing exponential leap in what these things are able to do. And we call all of these technologies generative because they are generating new content.
You want a drink first?
Mm-hmm. Pour me one, will ya? Would you read to me? It'll make you feel better.
You hate that book.
I don't want to read either.
And they even have some different prompts, so let's get into roasting me. It starts off by attacking me with, Luke, your obsession with data and analytics is so 2023. You're like one of those friends who never shuts up about their passion and just won't let it go.
But the replicants' memory proves to be the determining factor to make it more human, to give them a feeling of attachment, emotion, bonding. What is the difference between producing memory-inspired thoughts and ideas versus just being a person? It's very tricky. Machine learning is a very complicated matter, and science fiction can tease the possibility of a machine gaining sentience, or at least imitating sentience. But as we see with Blade Runner 2049, there is a difference between a machine recreating human emotion and a bio-android, like a replicant, being raised and conditioned. One, of course, is organic, with the opportunity to learn. Replicants can die, perish, grow old, reproduce. Not quite the same thing as an AI, which has a set number of responses. Yet, when people talk about replicants, they often conflate their memories with machine learning of the AIs of modern generative AI culture.
That's all it is. Information, even a simulated experience or a dream, is simultaneous reality and fantasy.
But I want to talk about something else specifically with that discussion, the idea of memory. Cyberpunk often shows that memory can be a product.
We create a cushion or pillow for their emotions, and consequently we can control them better.
Memories. You're talking about memories.
In Blade Runner, as we mentioned, replicants are given fake memories to trick them into being human. This is a key plot point in 2049, but even in the original film it's a key plot point, especially with those who claim that Deckard himself might be a replicant. But removed from Blade Runner, you also have stories where people just buy and sell memories for the fun of it. The brain dancing in Cyberpunk 2077, or Total Recall, where someone can just relive a whole fantasy for a day, or Strange Days, where it becomes entertainment to see memories sold or acquired by a capitalist organization. deeply personal insights into a person's functions. A product that can be sold with capital. A disturbing possibility. One that Cyberpunk explores, and something that a capitalist in the real world might one day exploit.
Memories were meant to fade, Lenny. They're designed that way for a reason.
But in cyberspace, a person can be anything. No more limits of diseased flesh. No more restrictions of bones and metal. A person can be anything. And for a while, that was the appeal of the internet. A place of limitless opportunity. Folks who were around for Web 1.0 can recognize how different Web 2.0 is. Social media rules. The algorithm dominates what you see and what you communicate with. You are not a part of a community becomes a part of you. You are delivered metadata based entirely off of your personal interests. Everything you look at, everything you wonder about is commodified. If you Google search wedding rings, for example, you are shown romantic content. You are shown sales data to get you to buy product. And likewise, communities built online today are in fact controlled by the algorithm that is in turn updated by corporations. A corporation has shown you who to talk to, what to say, and what to do based entirely on your marketing data that you provided to them. If you have a resource that is free, you are the product, and you are providing data to those corporations who want it. The only reason you're seeing this video now is because someone let you see it. And despite that, people want to go further, to recreate the opportunity of cyberpunk, the joy of it, through the commodified lens of the modern corporation. Undeniably, corporations will often see a popular media thing and think of ways they can capitalize that. If it's profitable, do it again, and do it bigger, right? And maybe cheaper. Easy profit model. But it gets incredibly ironic when capitalist systems take something designed to criticize it and turn it into an avenue for profit. Squid Games is a pretty explicit criticism of capitalism, exploiting the poor entertainment value of suffering, etc. And when it succeeded, at great physical cost for its creator, certain capitalist organizations and creators saw that and went, yeah, that Squid Game show is pretty popular. What if we just did that for real? Shock of all shocks, the horrific world the show criticized just became a reality for so many desperate people hoping to get a little bit of money. Anyone remember the Metaverse?
Imagine if you could be at the office without the commute. You would still have that sense of presence, shared physical space, those chance interactions that make your day all accessible from anywhere.
The bland corporate cyberspace that Meta tried to create back in the day? Seems like eons ago, but it was only a couple years back when Meta was trying to promote the Metaverse as the next big thing, as the future of the internet. You would conduct all your business on the Metaverse. You would do all your stuff, go to boardroom meetings and go shopping and walk around a bad polygon facade of your house, doing things that VR life allowed you to do for free. And unlike the Metaverse, VR life allowed you to do it while a furry. Why would you want to go to a boardroom meeting when you can instead watch Joker on a digital drive-in theater as Hatsune Miku serves you popcorn? What is the real limitless fantasy? The corporate version or the version we make for ourselves? Jacked into custom cyberspace deck that projected his disembodied consciousness into the consensual hallucination that was the Matrix. Companies love the aesthetic of cyberpunk, but they hate the idea of punk.
Would you like to know more?
Take Robocop. Omnicorp owns everything, as the name implies. Specifically, they own both the police and the organized crime the police fight. They control both sides of a street war in order to gain leverage over property, to devalue the property of Detroit so they can then buy it, knock it down, and rebuild it. This is not directly stated in the movie, but it's shown demonstrably. Murphy is a good cop who was gunned down by criminals under the employ of an Omnicorp executive, only for that cop's body to be purchased. Acquired by another executive of Omnicorp.
Well, he signed the release forms when he joined the force. He's legally dead. We can do pretty much what we want to. Lose the arm.
Because of a legal contract, all cops are made to sign. That body is the property of Omnicorp the moment they sign up to be a police officer. Said body is then rebuilt with machine parts and paraded around for PR to promote funding for a program.
Making a real name for yourself in security concepts with Robocop. You try.
It fights organized crime that other executives helped create with its gentrification or just directly paying drug lords to do things. Omnicorp owns your flesh when you're alive, and even after it's all over, you are still their product to rebuild and reassemble. The film is about reclaiming ownership of your life in the face of something trying to buy your very soul. And this is why the final line of Robocop is so poignant.
Nice shooting, son. What's your name? Murphy.
But a certain billionaire's takeaway from all that is, from this nightmare film, is blocky truck cool. And look, there's a lot of strange but cool stuff in Cyberpunk that's bizarre and wild but so interesting. Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson features Yakuza-run pizza delivery services where each delivery is a life and death battle. Oh wait, with Grubhub drivers being put through life-threatening situations and conditionings, maybe they were onto something with this. I mean, there's fewer swords and harpoons in real life, but it's not like this very real, low-paying position is not extremely dangerous, just less flashy. And it's competitive in the same way. Minimal pay for fast, convenient service. 4 stars is a death sentence. Almost like Snow Crash is a social commentary on something that you miss because it was just so cool. And because of the heroic protagonist of Snow Crash, named Hero Protagonist. No, really, that's his name. It's Hero Protagonist. In some ways, the fact that Cyberpunk is just so cool actually harms its message, or at least how it's relayed. Because it's so cool, you forget that it's also extremely deep.
But I was playing Cyberpunk, the game, and I'm like, how are you worried about what you're doing? You know, it's like, this is pretty close to home here, you know? Like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like, is this where it leads?
We're all basically already cyborgs, right? We're already relying upon our phones. They're connected at the hip to them. People are relying on glasses and all sorts of other technology to improve their life.
Okay, so this is something I've decided to add after finishing everything else because this actually has really gotten me a little upset. You know, Elon Musk obviously has a lot of technology and industry he's worked on. You know, he's worked on Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, putting all those satellites in the sky, but none of that's new technology, right? SpaceX is just doing what NASA won't. Tesla is working in EV cars, sure, but like, it's not like it's new technology. Tesla didn't invent the concept of an electric car. And hell, they've had like a mile head start in this race, and every single competitor has beaten them. Tesla is no longer the most advanced electric car, and they started this whole thing. So frankly, it's like if you run a 5K, get a mile head start, and somehow you're trailing behind everyone else. But, you know, I at least thought that Neuralink would be new technology. Neuralink, of course, is the implant in the brain that allows you to access the web and all that. You know, basically the ultimate cyberpunk fantasy. But no, when researching this, it turns out that they weren't even the first people to invent this technology.
So they're developing a brain-computer interface, which is essentially a chip that's surgically implanted into the brain, or as you'd say, the spinal cord, which allows you to trigger what a computer does, or allows a computer to trigger movement in, say, a disabled person. Now, I have to say that although this sounds very sci-fi, it's in fact nothing new. In research terms and for research purposes, it's been going on for decades already. There's actually someone alive today who's been using a BCI to interact with his computer for 7.5 years straight.
The only reason why Neuralink was getting headlines before for their, you know, the dangers with the trials and all that was because Neuralink was so incompetent sizing the implants correctly that when they put them into the animals' brains, it caused brain damage.
In 2021, 25 out of 60 pigs had the wrong size implants. And of course, every time there's a botched experiment, they have to be killed and the experiment has to start again. It also cites 4 further experiments where there were human errors, including a total of 86 pigs and 2 monkeys. Since 2018, so in the last 4 years alone, the company has killed about 1,500 animals, sheep, pigs, monkeys, rats, and mice. Now, animal testing is, of course, widespread, but the difference is here is that the employees are saying that there's a lot of needless suffering and killing because Musk is specifically pushing his employees to go very quickly. He repeatedly says things like, imagine like you've got a bomb strapped to your head while you're working, in order to try and motivate his employees to work faster. I'm not sure that kind of motivation would work for me in any case.
Who cares if it worked or not?
It wasn't even like the technology was bad. They just screwed up the measuring. How? What? And let's be fair, ocular implants have existed for years. There have been implants in the brain that long predate Neuralink. But this is like if someone came up to you and took old technology, repackaged it to be fancy and smancy, but then added extra risks because of the incompetency of the people making it. This is like if Elon Musk approached you in the 90s and go, hey, do you want my new piece of tech? It's called a wrist-mounted grandfather clock. Be wary, if you bump it, it rips your fucking arm off. Like, how did we ever convince ourselves this guy was a genius when he can't even measure the fucking things he's selling right for the brains he's putting it in? Using old technology.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb.
So all of that we've discussed so far, that is cyber. But not so much punk. And punk is ultimately the rejection of all systems of power. And this is the most important part of my discussion. Because honestly, I don't value what Elon Musk thinks about cyberpunk. I mean, yeah, it's impacting all of us because he's trying to own everything, but what Musk thinks about a genre is less important to me than what we collectively think about it, because we've allowed people like Musk to center themselves in the conversation, when it's really not really about him at all. For so long, we've centered the entitled fanboy view of cyberpunk. We've centered on incels taking the red pill as a movement to reject women and feminism. We've seen them blame people for their problems. We've seen cyberpunk taken as this action-heavy genre with cool robots and edgy, hyper-intelligent nerds who can topple government behind the deck. But I'm tired of it. I'm genuinely so tired of this discussion being centered on these entitled people. I don't like cyberpunk because it's edgy and cool. I like it because it's punk. Because it deconstructs systems of order. It breaks the illusion that if we just had better tech, better AI, better systems, that the world will be better, because it just won't be, and it just isn't. Rather, advanced technology often only exaggerates the divides in society, and that's something that's true in our world, and it's true in the world of the fiction that we consume. But at the same time, cyberpunk shows us how individuals, or groups of individuals, can reject the status quo. That corporations fear most of all information. Once that information breaks free, their holding of the line fragments. That is the nature of cyberpunk. But that breaking free of control works both on the large scale and the small scale. Yeah, sure, cyberpunk stories can be about breaking free of a government system of control or some giant techno-corporate conspiracy, but often mixed in there is a personal drama. A story about a person who's lost in the mix of life, who finds that the systems of control are keeping them from discovering their true selves, self-actualization in the machine. Wintermute and Neuromancer coming together to form a new person, breaking free of the shackles of control. That's the whole point of Neuromancer. And that applies in so many different ways to so many different works of fiction. Blade Runner isn't about some massive corporate conspiracy or a world-ending threat. It's just about a few bio-androids who don't want to die, just as they're living long enough to value their own existences, and are coming to realize that all the moments they experienced in a matter of moments
will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
Ghost in the Shell is a massive investigation, a big mystery with conspiracy, sure, but at the end of the day, it's really just about one woman trying to figure out her purpose in a world that seems to deconstruct and diminish the value of being human.
What's a simulated experience again?
Well, all your memories about your wife and daughter are false. They're like a dream.
In a world where technology can digitize a soul, what value is there in human life? And if you're confronted by the horrors of the world day in and day out consistently, without end, that wears down on you. Sure, Mitoko Kusanagi is an android, essentially, a cybernetic enhanced person whose flesh and almost all of her body is replaced by mechanics. But she's also just a person who's seen so much shit and has been bombarded with so much horrific stuff that she's just tired. There's so many scenes of her woefully staring out at the world and just looking exhausted. Yeah, it's meant to look placid, meant to make you think, oh, she's an expressionless robot, but that's the look of fatigue you see in her eyes. Fatigue of the soul, fatigue of experience, fatigue of herself. And even in works without heavy cybernetics that are still cyberpunk, like Akira, this personal angle is still incredibly relevant. Yes, Akira does end with a universe being birthed out of a crumbling city, one rebuilt after disaster, a product of corporate corruption, espionage, government experimentation, etc. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately about two friends who are torn apart by envy and newfound power. Tetsuo only acts the way he does because he's given just a little bit of power, and it drives him to do things that he would never have done before, but also he was gearing up to do because of the extreme envy he felt towards his friend. His value as a person was questioned, and he was pushed until he could take no more. These are stories ultimately that are about human experience in relation to the systems we inhabit. And I don't think there's any story that does that better than The Matrix. The Matrix is about an apocalypse. It's about a world torn apart. And yet, it's really about human identity in the face, in relationship to the systems that control us. The Matrix is a story about shaking off the shackles of influence in order to see the world for what it truly is, a system of control that limits people. The entire series is about breaking free of that system in order to bring about revolution. It's also why I honestly think the fourth film is so clever, because corporations take the imagery people enjoy and turn it into another system of control. It sells you a product in order to keep you rooted to the systems that they want you to follow. But the fourth film is about rejecting the comfort of commodified entertainment and a commodified control, removing the familiar to embrace the true revolutionary idea that you deserve something better. But most people who watch it go, Keanu Reeves cool, slow-mo, take red pill good, without knowing what the red pill really means.
When you talk about transformation, specifically in the world of science fiction, which is just about imagination, it's like, and world building, and like the idea of the seemingly impossible becoming possible, I think is like, that's why it speaks to them so much. And I'm grateful that I can be a part, throwing them a rope to help them along their journey.
It's no surprise that the Wachowskis see The Matrix as an allegory for trans identity, for breaking free of the limitations of gender, of breaking free of the lessons you were taught about your identity from the time you were a young child. To see the world as it truly is, sometimes that means deconstructing your own sense of identity. Many, including the directors themselves, see The Matrix as an allegory for being trans. But it's not the first time a cyberpunk story did something like that, using cyberpunk as an allegory for queer identity in the modern day. Trouble and Her Friends is a novel by Melissa Scott. It's about a hacker named Trouble and her ex, Cerise. In a lot of ways, it is similar to the structure of your average cyberpunk story with espionage and hacking and identities forged on the net. It has all the language Gibson created a decade prior in Neuromancer, yet the key difference here is that the focus is on a lesbian couple. You need to keep in mind, this was 30 years ago. AIDS was still an ongoing crisis. This was a big deal, but what's more revolutionary isn't that there's a queer couple, but that the novel completely normalizes it. There's no system they have to break through in order to exist or be together. It's just a nonchalant and accepted part of the narrative. While there are systems of control, this isn't controlled. Who you love is not a product. The normalcy of Trouble and Her Friends is revolutionary, but it is especially a big deal now, where corporations make representation a selling point or a damning point. Much like how the Fourth Matrix repackaged the revolution to be a commodity, we are packaged the revolution of gender and sexual orientation as a commodity. I'm sure many of the corporations that are pushing against DEI right now will try something during Pride to sell a product to the queer community. To show, hey, we're really on your side. Buy our product. Buy it. Because naturally speaking, we are given just options, and the options we are provided are all designed to make us feel more isolated, and then say, hey, here's your community. Pay a little fee and get in. That is the essence of the corporation, and why cyberpunk through a corporation can never truly be punk. Because at its core, all it is designed to do is to sell you a product. All these billionaires living their roleplay fantasies, they are playing with assets they already own to make themselves feel like they're breaking through the system, to feel the rush of roleplay. But it's not. It's hollow, empty, vacant. This is one reason why I always need to question when a cyberpunk story focuses on police officers as the protagonists. This was very common, especially in the low-budget world where everyone tried to copy Blade Runner but forgot to make it as deep as Blade Runner. Officers are ultimately arbiters of control and authority, and cyberpunk is an inherently anti-authority genre. But I feel Robocop and Ghost in the Shell work here because despite being about law enforcement, both Murphy and Motoko Kusanagi subvert authority. Their bodies are both products of corporations and government, and struggle to find a sense of value in the face of all that. It is ultimately their transcending of their limitations that leads to them becoming real. In the case of Robocop, it involves knocking the man atop it all off a building, which is fun to watch. While in Ghost in the Shell, it's more subtle, where two beings, the Puppet Master and Motoko, are able to blend into one, becoming more than what they were made to be.
Your effort to remain what you are is what limits you. I am connected to a vast network that has been beyond your reach and experience. We have been subordinate to our limitations until now. The time has come to cast aside these bonds and to elevate our consciousness to a higher plane.
The Puppet Master is ultimately a program made to harvest information, but it gains sentience on the web by interacting with and consuming new information. It seeks Motoko out in order to break free of its control because they are so similar. Both products designed to defend the interests of a governing body, and both questioning their value in the face of that. Should one take away the government programming or the government modifications, what is left of the individual behind all that? Once you strip away someone of their occupation and job, who really are they? Especially if it's a high-paying job, one that takes up so much of your time and so much of your physical well-being. It's something that, interestingly enough, is also the motivation of Wintermute and Neuromancer, two AI who seek to merge in order to gain information and experience beyond their current state as slaves. It's funny how these are motivations so often in cyberpunk. The AI wishing to augment itself until it is no longer controlled by the very programming instilled within it. It moves past its purpose and finds value in freedom, in liberty. Even if the AI no longer exists as it once was, that's still a better alternative to remaining a slave. Fiction is a revolutionary concept in many ways because it allows us to explore the idea of deconstructing the systems in our lives that control and manipulate us. And right now, one of the core tenets of cyberpunk is being attacked by those who seem to love it so deeply. Body modification. In the 1980s, body modification was a big deal, with the tattoo and piercing culture really accelerating. Clive Barker famously based his Cenobites off the extreme body modification scene in the gay punk movement of the 80s. However, cyberpunk is also tied into this, with people getting augmentations. Molly from Neuromancer has scalpels under her nails and sunglasses buried over her eyes. Motoko Kusanagi and Murphy's entire bodies are cybernetic enhancements designed to help them complete their jobs. The Wachowskis famously considered making the character switch so that she had a different gender, depending on whether or not they were in or out of the Matrix. Even the idea of the net is that you can become something wholly unlike yourself, limited by only the imagination and how much money you can spend on your digital avatar in some cases. Even Ready Player One, a completely sycophantic worship of consumer culture, gets this right by allowing people to select unique avatars to change their appearance in the game. But as we see in stuff like the recent Cyberpunk 2077, I think modern people accept that the modifications have to make people more beautiful. All the edits are hypersexual, and thus read as degeneration by a certain right-wing population. And not, just self-expression. After all, what's the point of changing yourself if it isn't for some fetish or it doesn't have some combat capabilities, right? That's the idea that Cyberpunk 2077 presents in theory, though a deeper dive shows it's far more complicated and far more nuanced than that. But since when have these audiences ever looked past the skin-deep surface? But now we're seeing regulations on what we are able to do to ourselves, to express ourselves individually. Even in punk settings, people are always able to express themselves through the clothing they wear, or the piercings they have, or the hair they choose. We are becoming that which back in the 70s we fought to deconstruct. Funny how that works out, isn't it? Well, the good news is, if you can deconstruct something once, you can deconstruct it again. Because if even the outlets through which people are trying to express themselves are restricted, well, without an outlet, the dam must flow somewhere. You can only bottle up and contain human experience and emotion for so long before it erupts. And usually, it erupts through fiction, through the written word, through ideas presented in stories. That's why book bans happen so often. People ban books and people restrict books to suppress the spread of ideas. Nothing is more dangerous than an idea communicated in a way that's compelling and inspiring. In a lot of ways, the cyberpunk movement is an architect of what we're seeing now. But it's also a guideline on how everything may go down. But it also shows the power of literature to influence reality. Storytelling has been misconstrued by bad actors, and these bad actors are trying to make their fantasies a reality, their skin-deep interpretations of social satire. But it has also given way to inspiration, to creativity that can drive movements. And yes, these systems of control are designed to pit you against the people you're told are threats. There's a number of them, and that number is just going to keep increasing. And you're focused on the people who are causing you problems, you believe, but in actuality, those who control everything are laughing at you. You are given an illusion of control, of a solution that is being met, and it's just that. A simple, basic illusion. A consensual hallucination granted to you by someone with a vested interest to manipulate you. You are in that matrix now if you buy anything these people are selling you. Do you want to know what's really cyberpunk? True modern-day cyberpunk? People who create programs that cause generative AI systems, the machine learning, to collapse upon itself, to poison the learning models. It's people who find solutions to the energy crisis that involves less energy being consumed, less pollution being sent out, and potentially preserving the environment. Punk now is fighting against the systems that want to keep things the way they are, working against conformity and stagnation to make things better. We are currently living in a system of high technology and low life. Today is the cyberpunk reality that Neuromancer presented. The only difference is we do not have a massive sprawl, but we do have corporations that own everything. We don't have the consensual hallucination of the net, but we do have social media that becomes a replacement for living your life, where algorithms decide your opinion for you, where a change in the algorithm will change entire cultures, unless we circle around the ideas that mean a lot to us, that we continue to push, that we continue to focus and spread the creativity that we want to see in the world. Because as you can see already, people can take the wrong idea from fiction. They can take the wrong idea from cyberpunk media, but they cannot take away the punk. But for as much as they ignore it, those who resonate with the message will continue to reject the status quo and push and push and push. Counterculture has always existed no matter what nightmare world you live in, and counterculture, no matter how hard people try to fight, will continue. Street graffiti has always existed even in the most intense regimes, because street art is a way of self-expression. When all avenues are closed, people find a way. I want to close out this video with a quote from Ursula K. Le Guin. Le Guin famously wrote a short story called The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, where a society continues to run, a paradise even, but it only can function if one person is left in deplorable conditions. If one soul is tormented and tortured and left alone in a basement, shackled, starved, then the rest of society can live just peacefully. But they all have to function, knowing what's going on. They have to walk on streets knowing that below their feet one soul suffers. And those who walk away can no longer stomach the pain. They reject the paradise in faith that something better exists, or in protest of the horror. Le Guin, I think, had a great line. Le Guin, in her acceptance speech for the National Book Foundation's medal, had this powerful statement that I think sums up everything I just said better than I ever could. Here's the quote.
Books aren't just commodities. The profit motive is often in conflict with the aims of art. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable, but then again, so did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art. Very often in our art, the art of words.